Hello again, everybody, and welcome in. From BaltimoreBaseball.com, I'm Steve Cockey, and we have some movement with the Orioles on the free agent market for the first time this offseason. Here to tell us all about it, of course, our senior writer joins us now, Dan Connolly. Dan, how are you?
Good. Are you talking about Logan and Druzik?
Of course I am, Dan. They're loading up on Logan's. I think this is, the third one. I joked on Twitter the other day that CBS's Lara Logan, they're also very interested in bringing her on.
Yeah, well, they were trying to get Kenny Loggins to do the opening day anthem because Loggins is close to Logan, but Logan's in anyway. Anyhow, that's not who you're talking about, Steve. Who you're talking about is Welington Castillo, Beef Wellington, as he's referred to, the 29-year-old catcher who's with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who once was traded for Mark Trumbo. Little weird fact there for you. The Orioles have signed Castillo to a one-year deal worth $6 million, but there's actually a second year that he has an option, a player option, which he could pick up himself, which would be about $7 million. So you're talking about a 2-year, $13 million deal, assuming it all goes well. That's a pretty good price, considering that Matt Wieters was $15.8 million last year. Castillo's a good price there. So I think it makes sense, and I think it could be an interesting thing for the Orioles.
Certainly seems to be, Dan. Were you surprised at all that this is sort of an opt-out kind of scenario where the Orioles have been against that sort of contract structure in the past, and this is again with this player option where it's a 2-year deal. If he plays really well in the first year, he can leave. If he doesn't play so well and doesn't feel like his market is good, the Orioles are on the hook for $7 million in that second year. Did that structure surprise you at all?
A little bit, but when I talked to one of the sources in the organization, they said that we're looking at it more as an opt-in than an opt-out. It's a 1-year deal as far as they're concerned, but if they get him for 2, they get him for 2, and they can work around that. So I think it was a little bit surprising, honestly, because they have been against the opt-outs. But frankly, I don't think it's super surprising, simply because they were hoping for a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year if they could get the right guy, because they do have Chance Cisco, who is going to be learning in the minors. So I think this just gives them extra insurance to Cisco.
How did this deal come together, Dan? Because we've kind of followed it along at BaltimoreBaseball.com over the last week or so. It seemed like there was really an ebb and flow to these discussions and negotiations. They kind of went hot and cold. What was your sense on how these talks went down?
Yeah, you know what, Steve? In covering the Orioles as long as I have, there's been a whole lot of ebbs and flows of negotiations in which I've tried to follow. And basically, Castillo was a guy that really, once he was non-tendered by the Diamondbacks, the Orioles were interested in him. And they touched base and everything else. And then it kind of stagnated for a while. And then at the winter meetings, they touched base with his people again. And then that Friday, they really had some meaningful discussion to the point where it looked like it was really getting close. And then I was told a couple days later that the negotiations had halted. I don't know exactly the 100% reason, but my sense was specifically it had to do with length of contract. The Orioles did not want to go over 2. They preferred a 1-year deal. Castillo's people had gotten a multi-year deal, or more than multi-year offer from what I was told. So they were actually pushing for more years than that. It was kind of stagnating back and forth. And there was a sense that it wouldn't get done. And one source within the industry told me he's probably going to sign elsewhere. And then today or Wednesday morning, I think it started up again. And I think there was real meaningful discussion between the two sides. Suddenly, the people who I was talking to who were not optimistic, suddenly were optimistic. And then this came down. Now, of course, one thing we do have to caution is this is an agreed-to contract, but it's not a signing yet until, say it with me, the physical.
Olivia Newton-John, Dan, let's get physical.
Yeah, and honestly, one thing in this is that the people that you're dealing with on Castillo's side were actually the representatives who had Grant Balfour a couple years ago, and we had a disaster with the Orioles physical there. Oh, so it's never guaranteed until it's guaranteed, but it looks like it's going to happen. It looks like Welington Castillo is going to be the Orioles catcher for 1 to 2 years.
Given that, Dan, and the $6 million salary, we would have to think that Matt Wieters' tenure with the Baltimore Orioles is over. Your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on Matt Wieters' career potentially ending with the Baltimore Orioles?
Well, the first part, Steve, I mean, if, one would assume he's gone for several reasons. One, he really isn't going to be, really working out for anybody or anything until January. And Scott Boras says that he would assume most of his catching clients over the years have signed in January, he said. So it's going to be a while for Matt Wieters, and the Orioles need to go ahead and get themselves a catcher. So they went ahead and did that. Now, does that mean that Wieters is gone? I would say 99%, yeah, most likely. The 1% is that door being cracked open in case Matt Wieters doesn't get, the offer he's looking for. And if January and February comes around and all of a sudden he's the Pedro Alvarez or he's the Nelson Cruz or he's still waiting to get a job. And if that's the case, and all things are equal money-wise, I'm sure Matt Wieters and the Orioles would talk again because Matt Wieters liked playing for the Orioles and the Orioles liked having Matt Wieters. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there will be a market for Matt Wieters. I think he will, get something that he's happy with. There's just not a lot of suitors out there. I keep hearing the Nationals. We'll see. The Braves were a team that we had thought would have a lot of interest, Matt being, a Georgia Tech guy who now lives in Atlanta. We'll see. When it all comes together, I'm not sure if the musical chairs have all stopped and Matt doesn't have a job. If that's the case, then yeah, I could see the Orioles definitely revisiting that because they loved having the guy. As far as his overall career at the Orioles, I know a lot of people were expecting Johnny Bench, and they were expecting this Hall of Fame catcher. Adam Jones once joked to me that, people thought he was Jesus in shin guards. And obviously that was really, really, just ridiculous parameters that he had to kind of go through and he, expectations that were just too lofty for anybody. All the Chuck Norris jokes and stuff about Matt Wieters. He was a pretty darn good catcher and a very good leader and a fairly solid offensive player. One of the most clutch players in Orioles, in the last 20 years in Orioles history. You needed a big hit. Matt Wieters could deliver that big hit for you. He will always be considered an all-star. And frankly, you can start the conversation now, and it's maybe something I'll put out there at some point on BaltimoreBaseball.com. But he probably is the greatest catcher in Orioles history overall. If you look at number of all-star games, if you look at that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, Rick Dempsey was here a long time. There's some other guys, Andy Etchebarren. But if you look at the all-around package, Matt Wieters is probably the best player who ever played catcher for an extended period of time for the Orioles.
All right, Dan, to wrap this up, we're talking Castillo versus Wieters. What is your sense of how Castillo will stack up to the expectation and the production that Wieters had here over the last number of years since coming up, at least on paper anyway, and certainly offensively? The numbers are very, very close. You look the last 2 years and even further out, average on base, slugging, OPS, they're all within percentage points of each other, talking Wieters versus Castillo. But of course, Castillo has some potential red flags defensively, a number of passed balls this past season, pitch framing, though that was also a knock on Wieters, has not been kind, those metrics to Castillo. So what's your sense on how he may stack up here for the Orioles?
I talked to one person in the industry today that says that Welington Castillo is a better catcher right now than Matt Wieters, and he's younger than him. So who knows? I saw Matt Wieters play every day for a long period of time, and obviously, everybody's got deficiencies in their game. I'm not a huge believer in pitch framing and things of that nature. I think that I shouldn't say I'm not a believer, but I think that too much is put on those kind of things. Castillo, has a good arm. He throws guys out. So does Matt. Matt handled the game very well. I've not seen what Castillo does as far as that's concerned. I know the pitchers trusted Matt Wieters and liked throwing to him for the most part. We'll see if that happens with Castillo. But like I said, I talked to one person in the industry that says that Castillo is a better Matt Wieters and is a year younger and obviously is cheaper. So we'll see. I think that, we saw how good Matt Wieters was, in the first couple of years of his career. He really concentrated on his defense, and that was the most important thing. I still think Matt Wieters has a lot left in him, to be honest. I think this past year we started seeing more of that. The 2 years before that were pretty much lost because of the injury. So I think that someone's going to get a pretty darn good all-around catcher in Matt Wieters. But I think the Orioles feel like they got a pretty darn good all-around catcher in Welington Castillo.
All right, Dan, we will see how it plays out, but another potential value signing for Dan Duquette, and we'll see how the rest of the offseason plays out. We will check back in with you here on our video series as things go along. For BaltimoreBaseball.com, I'm Steve Cockey. Until next time, so long.